This is just one of my areas of research expertise in terms of organizational justice, behavioral ethics, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the reason I undertook this project was sometimes you just get tired of certain narratives that you see happening in society. I just got tired of people acting like this backlash toward diversity, equity, and inclusion was not rooted in systemic anti-Black racism. So the conversation in many of the Black communities that I'm in was, yo, this is Jim Crow 2.0. We know that implies there's a connection to the first Jim Crow era from the 1880s to the 1960s, approximately. The project was, let's just put this to bed, let's get it out there and show like there's a connection to what's going on now and is directly tied to our past.
Hmm.
It has always been a core part of me to speak out when I see injustices happen. I probably got that from my mom. My mom raised me and my brothers for the most part by herself. Seeing her journey as a Black woman raising three Black boys in America, she had to be super tough. As you get older, I went off to college, you're in the business school, you start studying various aspects of discrimination in the workplace. And it got me thinking, wow, what all types of sexist practices and racist practices did my mom encounter in the workplace? She simply did not let my brothers or me know about it because she didn't want to rob our innocence as Black boys, which will eventually be robbed. Also, I am a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. So understanding the legacy of my fraternity, members like Dr. MLK Jr., Thurgood Marshall, etc. So there's always been this strong advocacy for our community, social justice for all. And it probably got me in trouble why I couldn't make it in corporate America. And I had to shift to a career that allows you a lot more autonomy in terms of critical thinking, using your voice, putting things down on paper, getting it out there is based upon how you make the argument that people buy. You can make that argument with data. So it's been this through line throughout my life in terms of I just can't be quiet when I see injustices happening. The motivation for this project was why are we ignoring the elephant in the room? And particularly why diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, is under attack. And those of us who are actually doing this work is very politically coordinated. And I don't think a lot of people want to admit that this is a political phenomenon. When you understand that social conservatism as an American political ideology historically and currently has been the most hostile political ideology toward Black economic and social progress. It was social conservatives, the Dixiecrats back in the day that wanted to keep slavery. It was the social conservatives when they were in the GOP that opposed our civil rights. Historically and currently, there's always been this documented, well known evidence-based discussion that social conservatism as an American political ideology has always been hostile toward Black economic and social progress. And they have, for whatever reason, equated diversity, equity, and inclusion as to this is making organizations and college campuses too Black and too brown for our liking, so let's attack it. So when you understand it from that viewpoint, then the connection becomes easy to see why many Black people in America understand this to be Jim Crow 2.0. This was a heavy project to take on, but we felt it was necessary to have that baseline connection and then understand the transmitting mechanism because you had to have this institutional highway, if you will, that can bring the sins of the past into the sins of the future. And that was the mediating mechanism where we tied in the amount of times a state supported Trump's presidential campaigns. So generally, if you lynched a lot of Black people, you went 3 for 3 in supporting his presidential campaign, which was rooted in the Southern strategy, exploiting people's fears against Black Americans and African Americans. You were just exploiting that resentment. And if you went 3 for 3 in supporting his presidential elections as a state, so your state went to him, then you enacted an anti-DEI law. So the intensity of a state supporting Trump's presidential campaigns was also rooted in anti-Black. Like, you have given acceptance, you have tolerated that anti-Black racism is okay. You have signaled that there is a legitimacy for you to have these anti-Black beliefs and practices. And that is how anti-Black racism continues to evolve. It needs this institutional host, if you will. What Trump has done with him using the Southern strategy, you hear it a lot where it was like he has emboldened his followers to really reveal who they claim themselves to be. For example, Laura Loomer, she just made some very racist comments toward Jasmine Crockett.
Yeah.
And that's not an anomaly. That's just, I feel safe to be who I am. And an analogy is I can take off these white hoods and these white sheets and show who I am because the person who occupies the highest political office has made it safe and has given freeway to anti-Black sentiments to be a part of not only his presidential campaigns, but his 2 presidential administrations as well. How many organizations are failing their Black employees is simply this. You refuse to name it what it is. You refuse to say, yes, this is a form of systemic anti-Black racism, so we are going to fight because we have Black employees in our organizations, and we believe our Black employees when they say, yeah, this is an attack on me and my community. So the failure is leaders simply don't want to acknowledge it, whether they are just ignorant of it or they're just sticking their heads in the sand and trying to pretend, because America is really good at sticking their hand in the sands when it comes to issues that disproportionately impact the Black community. Having employee resource groups is not illegal. Having cultural celebrations where everyone is invited is not illegal. We are capitulating to this, and since we are the power people and we're capitulating, now that's going to induce fear. Because once I induce fear, that fear is what reinforces this systemic oppression. So eliminate the fear, let Black people know that they are not fighting this by themselves. You will put institutional resources toward them to make them feel psychologically safe and respected. Running from a bully never got a bully off your back. You have to defend yourself. And all of this factors in the emotional and mental toll that this work takes, that it takes on me and other people who actually do the work and care about making organizations, this country, more inclusive and equitable for everyone and not just a privileged group. Understand a lot of these attacks we are facing are rooted in systemic anti-Black racism. Some people are just not ready to meet the moment. So we have to meet the moments in the way that our ancestors met the moment. When has America ever prospered following the lead of former Confederate states? It is typically a coalition of oppressed people pairing with enough of effective allies that we get a critical mass to enact policy. So it's never a consensus, it's never a strong majority. It's generally us speaking up for ourselves. There's a certain level of interest convergence with enough people in key positions, but it's never like a consensus movement that advances people who are marginalized, like African Americans in American society.